Okay.
Abani Ghani, everyone. This is Professor Amin Ra, Professor Emeritus for California State University, Long Beach Africana Studies Department, along with my co-host, historian Joe Hembrick, longtime historian and teacher and educator for the Compton Unified School District and Linwood Unified School District, well as his individual thrust to uncover the hidden treasures of our history and present them to young people as well as a public audience as my co-host. Tonight we have an exciting show. One of the measures of being a good presenter or having quality information, as Naeem Akbar said, our history is quantitative and qualitative, is are you ever invited back to make another presentation? That's how you measure the quality of presentation that a person makes. And we're proud to invite Brother Akinyele back from Georgia University, chair of the, are you still chair?
No, I gave it up 2019.
Professor at Georgia State, right, University, Africana Studies Department, and longtime organizer from the hills of Compton to the streets of South Central, building a new African people perspective along with many others, one of the most progressive organization of young people that we had in Los Angeles, also helped build the Black United Front in Los Angeles. And so we're just happy to have him back, where his topic is about the FBI COINTELPRO. And we can't wait to get into it. And Brother Akinyele, Dr. Umoja can tell you more about himself or just get into his presentation. Yeah, we turn the show over to him. And what our platform generally is he speaks for 20, 30 minutes or however he wants, and then questions and answers. We're happy to see Brother Talib, Brother Mashinda, and the good doctor here, along with Brother Ernest Hall Jr. on the set to be a part of our presentation, with Rasha Key, who's the host of Community Education Network that provides us the platform for the term Conscious Corner that was coined by Brother Joe Hembrick, Conscious Corner. So Brother Umoja, you go right ahead, Akinyele.
Man, I appreciate this, Professor Rob, appreciate that introduction, as well as the decades of service that you provided to our people. And I'm definitely feel blessed to be hosted by Brother Rasha Key, but also to be in the presence of my big brothers, because they're a year ahead of me at Compton High. And, you know, two brothers I looked up to, still look up to, my brother Ernest Hall's on, and the mighty Joe Hembrick, you know, who, and, you know, I really appreciate the years of service Joe Hembrick has put in educating and mentoring the youth of Compton and Linwood and other places that we grew up. My topic for tonight is COINTELPRO. And I told Brother Hembrick that it would be COINTELPRO, the conspiracy to destroy Black power and Black freedom. And when I thought about it, Brother Hembrick, I was thinking that COINTELPRO, the secret war versus Black people. There's been a secret war against our people, but really it goes back before any FBI program. But from the first moment, our people were on the shores of North America. In fact, even before that, when we were captured, there's been a war waged against us. In that spirit, and I know earlier this month, you had programming on Black August Resistance. I think my brother G2 Sadiki was on, who I know and worked with when I was in Southern California. So with that, I want to start by saying Black August Resistance to everybody who's listening. If you want to talk more about that later on, we can. Another reason I chose this topic is, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we had the raid on Trump's residence in Mar-a-Lago. And the FBI made that raid. and then, you know, sometimes some folks think, well, man, maybe the FBI is on our side because we know that Trump is a scoundrel. We know he's a criminal. We know he's a racist and supported by white supremacists. But, you know, sometimes you can't go for the okie doke. A few weeks before that, they raided another Pan-Africanist organization, the African People's Socialist Party, raided their offices in Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, and in St. Louis. A couple of years ago, the FBI created this category in 2017 they called Black Identity Extremists. And this they did in response, of course, ever since the killing of Trayvon Martin and the responses that particularly our youth have had to not only the killing of Trayvon Martin, but Sandra Bland, several others, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, here in Atlanta, Rashad Brooks. You know, the young people have been out in the street. And so this category was created by the FBI to begin to target many Black activists who were out in the streets during that time. So similarly to what J. Edgar Hoover, during the rise of, you know, people in Professor Rye's generation, when they rose up and created Black studies, they rose up in Watts and, you know, Detroit and Newark and several other places. During that time, J. Edgar Hoover created a category to target Black organizations that he called Black nationalist hate groups. Now, keep in mind, he called it Black nationalist hate groups, but people like Martin Luther King were in that category. So it wasn't just, if you know, people, my generation will remember H. Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael. It wasn't just the so-called militants, but any Black person who had influence, any Black person who was popular, any Black person that was fighting against white supremacy. Martin Luther King fits in that category. So number one, what is COINTELPRO? COINTELPRO is the counterintelligence program. It's an acronym for counterintelligence program of the FBI. When they say counterintelligence, they want to stop anything, any type of resistance that comes up that's opposed to their power. And so that included first starting with when they initiated a program called COINTELPRO. It was initiated in the 1950s. They claimed at that time the targets were communists and socialists, but again, particularly with the development of the civil rights movement, then the Black Power movement, the focus was on Black organizations, what they call Black nationalist hate groups, even though it includes Martin Luther King. Okay, so there's 6 points I want to bring up about COINTELPRO and this war against Black people. Number one, what they call counterinsurgency, or what we'll just very clearly call the war versus Black people, goes beyond the FBI. It's not just the FBI. That's not the only agency that surveils and infiltrates Black organizations, tries to disrupt Black movement. In fact, decades ago, the Memphis Commercial Appeal, the main newspaper in Memphis, did a series of articles detailing the role of Army intelligence in targeting Dr. King. They even presented an argument that Army intelligence might be responsible for the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And that's, again, the Memphis Commercial Appeal. It would be like the LA Times in Memphis, Tennessee. So it's not just the FBI. And of course, you know, my friends in LA, my friends and family in LA, y'all all know that it wasn't just the FBI that played a role in some of the disruption of Black organizations in the 1960s and 70s. Of course, the LAPD, the LA County Sheriff played a role, okay, and setting up people like Geronimo G. Jago, or also known as Geronimo Pratt. So that's number one. It goes beyond the FBI. Number two, it's historic. It goes beyond the 1960s. Of course, you all had programming for a couple of weeks on the Honorable Marcus Garvey. And we know that J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI and particularly initiated the counterintelligence program, his first target when they formed, even before it's called the FBI, the Bureau of Investigation, was the Honorable Marcus Garvey. And that became his primary objective, to set up Marcus Garvey, to imprison him, and then ultimately to deport him. It went beyond that, and we'll talk about other tactics. I'm sure Brother Hembrick talked to y'all about how Black critics of Garvey, oftentimes set up by the FBI, were used to dismantle Garvey's movement, which was the largest Black movement in the history of our people in the world, not just in the United States, but in the world. Now, let's go even before Marcus Garvey. In California right now, you all have a reparations task force. The first real reparations movement in the United States was started by two individuals, a sister by the name of Callie House and a brother by the name of Isaiah Dickerson. They set up a group called the Ex-Slave Mutual Relief and Bounty Association. Had hundreds of thousands of members, mostly in the South. Okay, the Ex-Slave Mutual Relief and Bounty Association. What did they argue? They basically said that, like, if U.S. soldiers got pensions from the Civil War, they not only gave U.S. soldiers, but they gave Confederate soldiers pensions. The federal government did after the Civil War. Then Black people who have been enslaved need to have pensions, need to have some sort of compensation. But because they began to organize this movement and began to, again, recruit hundreds of thousands of people, mostly in the South, they were targeted by the federal government, imprisoned. She did over a year in prison and was released, which derailed the movement, Callie House and Isaiah Dickerson. And they basically used the same thing that they did to target Marcus Garvey and to get Marcus Garvey off the street. They said that she defrauded the males. They basically used the fact that they recruited members and said that they were going to advocate for pensions, that was some way, some sort of fraud against Black people. But they didn't claim that they were going to pay people pensions. They said that they were going to advocate to try to get pensions for our people, and people were trying to pay for something they felt was in their political interest. But it's still, this is the same playbook that was used for Marcus Garvey. But my basic point is this historic, it goes before the 1960s. It goes before even Marcus Garvey with Callie House. In fact, if we look deep enough, we're going to find some investigations, some targeting that took place even while our ancestors were enslaved. Number three, it's ideological. What I mean, it's not just, we think classically thinking of these programs as the assassination of folks, as the imprisonment of folks, as the forcing of folks into exile. Okay, but also they use it to impact our ideas, to impact how we think. One of the major tactics that COINTELPRO used during the 1960s is they would plant articles in newspapers to promote ideas about people. They would use the press. I'll give you an example of that. Brother Rod, you might remember one of my comrades in the movement, we had him speak one time at the Black Consciousness Conference. Brother Ahmed Obafemi, he just became an ancestor earlier this year. Okay. And Ahmed Obafemi, in the 1970s, before I met him, he went to the Democratic Convention with the Republic of New Africa, and they had a campaign around reparations. The Mississippi delegation of the Democratic Party supported their particular campaign, and it was going to be raised at the Democratic Convention. Ahmed went and was passing out leaflets about this, and then they arrested Ahmed and said he was there to assassinate President McGovern, excuse me, candidate McGovern, the Democratic candidate. When that happened, I'm in Compton, I'm in high school, just graduated from high school. I read that in the newspaper until I met Ahmed 5 years later. I had gone for the okie doke because they plant ideas in our minds, knowing that these charges were erroneous, and he wasn't ultimately charged with that, but they arrested him for that and then just put it in the newspaper. A lot of things were put in the newspaper to influence our ideas, to make us think that a movement, these folks are crazy, we shouldn't relate to them, or things of that nature. Which gets me to number 4. They create division within our communities, and some division lasts decades later. Divide and conquer tactics. We saw these divide and conquer tactics by articles that were floated in the press about Malcolm X to divide him from Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. Okay, so they utilize divide and conquer tactics. And again, some of these divisions last years. We still have people in certain organizations that decades later, they won't speak to another organization, but the division was created or even exacerbated, if I could use that word, made even bigger by the FBI and their divide and conquer tactics. Divide and conquer tactics for our people are not new. In fact, Brother Hembrook, we might not be here in America had it not been for divide and conquer tactics. Dividing one set of Africans from another set of Africans and having our ancestors fight against one another, and then they sell the prisoners of war into captivity. So divide and conquer is a tactic that's been historically used. And again, COINTELPRO, what we call COINTELPRO, this war against Black people, has created divisions. And again, it lasts for decades later. They become grudges that are that people even teach intergenerationally, a grudge of one Black organization against another organization. But number 5, and this might sound a contradiction from what I just said, you got to be discerning from where you get your information from, what groups you join. The example I'll give for that is the FBI during the COINTELPRO period set up what they call pseudo gangs. What is a pseudo gang? A pseudo gang is a military tactic. It was first, at least using that name, was first employed against what were called the Mau Mau in Kenya, the resistance against the British colonialism. And a British military commander named Kitson, he set up his own Mau Mau groups to disrupt what the Mau Mau was doing, to have them go in the community in Kenya and commit atrocities and have people think it was the Mau Mau that did it. To create, again, utilize them for divide and conquer tactics. In the 60s, the FBI did set up pseudo gangs to disrupt activities of organizations and particular communities. Again, some divisions that still last and beefs that last in our communities today. And I'll conclude with this point before we go to the discussion. I would argue, and particularly to my brothers and sisters in California, as you all are discussing reparations task force, this is a reparations issue. This is a reparation issue. Reparation is not, it's about slavery, but it's everything that happens up to today against our people, any damage against our people. And COINTELPRO specifically was a program to divide our organizations. In some cases, people were killed. Some cases, people were exiled, but it also created psychological, mental, and social damage in our community. And these are violations of our, not only our human rights, but they are things that impact how we live today. I think of one campaign I'm working on as Brother Amarai still work on campaigns for political prisoners, and one is Dr. Mutulu Shakur, who was captured in Los Angeles, California. I believe it was in 1986. and he was accused of breaking Sada Shakur out of prison and several other things. Right now he's in prison, and he's suffering from cancer. He's been given months to live, and they will not release him from prison, give him a compassionate release. They say because he's a danger to the community, even though he's in hospice. This shows to me that there's a continued hostility the United States government has against many of our freedom fighters. That Mutulu I've actually worked with since he's been incarcerated. I used to do work in the federal prison system as an educator, and I know that he helped transform several brothers. He brought unity together in the prisons he was in between Crips and Bloods, but not only that, members of the Nation of Islam, Rastafarians, Black Marxists, Black nationalists. He brought all those brothers and brothers together because he was in prison with men. Those are the type of leaders that our enemies don't want on the streets. And so it continues today. It's still a reparations issue. And we know if men like Mutulu were on the street, there would be a greater unity on our streets and in our communities. So I'm gonna close right there. I just would say to stay woke. This ain't something that ended in the 1960s. It didn't begin there, and it's still going on today. I'll close right there. Thank y'all for having me and waiting to have some engagement with y'all.
Brother Hembrecht, Joe, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
You wanna call on the speakers, or you want me to do it?
Go ahead on. You call on.
I'm gonna start with Brother Ernest Hall. He's our guest. And do we have any questions or either comments with regards to the presentation?
No, man, I don't have any comments right now, man. It's very interesting, and I'm loving listening and learning.
Okay, then, Brother Mashinda, how you doing? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. No, I don't have any comments. Like the brother just said, I'm enjoying the presentation. I appreciate the brother presenting tonight. It gives the platform to reach a lot of folks. Hopefully, many people tap into this conversation. Very interesting, very great history as far as history information masses need to know about. But no questions right now.
All right. Brother Talib, did you ever get your speaking mic together?
Professor Ra, he put in the chat, he don't have it together.
Okay, all right then. Good doctor, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Good doctor asked me a bunch of questions last time. All right, brother.
Let's go with the reparation one first, because you mentioned something about two people that started something slave, some group. What year was that?
They started it in, let me see, I'm gonna give you the exact year.
Or the other question, how long?
Hold on one second, it won't take me that long. It's in the 1890s that they founded this ex-slave mutual relief and bounty association. It was started in, hold on, I'm going into my notes, 1894. And she was put in prison in 1916.
Okay, so they started reparations talk in 1890?
Yeah, but truth be told, reparations, and I've taught, for the last 4 years, I've taught classes on reparations, and I've, gotten information from a lot of the historians and experts on it. Truth be told, the first time that somebody tried to get reparations was in, I'm thinking the year was 1783, a sister by, I'm trying to remember her first name, but it's gonna come to me. She sued her master, who released her, gave her her freedom, but then she said, well, look, you can't just free me. This is in Massachusetts. You gotta pay me. And she actually won in court. She won in court, and they paid her for 2 years, and then they stopped paying her. When she went back to court, they wouldn't pay her anymore. But that's the first case we know of. But then in 1860, in the state I live in Georgia, General Sherman began to conquer for the Union the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. At that time, the coast of Georgia and South Carolina, even before the war, was like 85% black. And when the Confederates heard he was coming, they left. When he got there, it was never black people. And he had to figure out what's he gonna do with all these black folks. And so they met with 30 black ministers in Savannah, Georgia, and they asked them what did they want. And they want to be interdispersed throughout the population, or did they want their own land? Except for one minister, all of them said they wanted their own land. So General Sherman came up with something called 40 acres and a mule. It was Sherman's Field Order number 15. You can find that, online. It's they actually have the transcripts of the meeting, everything. But then when Abraham Lincoln died, what's his name? Andrew Johnson rescinded that. That's a first case. But Callie House is a first organized movement, where she's organizing other people to say, look, we need to get compensated for the service we did during slavery, that they so-called freed us, but they ain't give us nothing. You know what I mean? They wrong, even today, when you wrongly incarcerate somebody, they could sue and get, some compensation. Geronimo, after he had been set up by the FBI, the LA County Sheriff, and the LAPD, when they put him in prison, that what was he in, Rob? About 27 years. When he was released, they made a deal where they paid him $5 million for the period of time. It was a light amount of compensation, but I think Johnny Cochran advised him if he didn't take that $5 million, they were going to keep him in court forever, and he wouldn't have got anything. And so at least he got that $5 million, and of course, knowing Brother Geronimo, he used that money, made good use of it. He set up development projects in Ghana and in Tanzania, as well as in Louisiana, with the money that $5 million he got. And so, so compensation like that is not an unusual thing. I know I start running my mouth.
No, so what I'm getting, so would it be fair to say like every generation would come up with a reparations kind of mainstream? Because to me, it's just begun mainstream, 5, 6, 10 years ago, reparations. Growing up, I was born in the mid-60s, so
yeah, I think
it just became mainstream. So I don't know if it became a mainstream because Congress, they starting to look at it now. I don't know if they were looking at it back then. And like you said, when you told me, you go back to 1890, I had no clue that it started way back then. I knew about the 40 acres and the mule. I knew the rescinded. I don't know if someone on the show talked about it. I read somewhere, but I knew about that.
Well, I know you've had programming on reparations before, and that's something. If I'm so blessed, if Brother Hembrick and Brother Rod want to bring me back, I could speak on the history of the reparations movement. One of the things I think that happened is, Brother Rod knows some of these people, but you have Imari Obadele from the Republic of New Africa, Chokwe Lumumba, who was my big brother from the New African People's Organization, and the leaders of the National Council of Black Studies, not studies, but Black lawyers. In the late 80s, they decided that, look, at that time, it's primarily Black nationalists to support reparations, but we want to make this broader. So that's one of the periods of time, and it's particularly after the Japanese had their compensation they received for what happened in the concentration camps. They created the Cobra organization, and then one of the things they did was to lobby congressional people, but they didn't just make the issue of reparations around Black people getting independence or going back to Africa. That's one form of reparations, but they tried to broaden it out. They had a strategy to because they knew until they got the masses, as you all mentioned, and even some of these Black politicians on board, you had to get more people behind it than just Black nationalists and Pan-Africans. Because it ain't enough of us. It's about 12 of us, right? No, I'm playing. But you know what I mean? You had to get more momentum around it. I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, and Brother Rock keeps on referring to this, we created something called the Black United Front. And that was to try to begin to bring more people into the conversation and get more of us working together. Because if we can get all of our people, or a significant number, you ain't never gonna get everybody, but a significant amount of our people, like Marcus Garvey did, behind an idea, then we ain't gonna have nothing. Bottom line, it won't be enough. And so that's what they did with reparations. They tried to broaden it out. I think it still needs some more momentum. It needs to be more grassroots, right? And what I mean by grassroots is when Joe, Ernest, and I were growing up, I remember on certain days, like a lot of us wouldn't go to school on Malcolm X's birthday or something like that. We need to get it where junior high school kids are willing to do something around reparations. You know, we need to get it where everybody's church is talking about it. We need to get it where everybody's mosque is talking about it. Y'all feel me? It needs to be a broad issue. Just like when we got voting rights, it was that type of momentum where people were willing to sacrifice behind it. They were even willing to put their bodies on the line. So if reparations is going to work, it has to be a broad issue and not just the issue of one or two groups.
Okay. Come back to later. Let me go back to the other one, the divide and conquer. And you talk about how law enforcement, got it. That was divide and conquer even in their slavery days. As of today, what do you think the percentage of divide and conquer is law enforcement, and percentage is done by law enforcement, and the percentage done by us alone in our own groups?
I think sometimes you could set some in motion. Again, it could go decades ago. Again, when really, I think when it was, like I mentioned, Hembrick and Hall, they're like a year older than me. By the time they had graduated in the community I grew up in, when I was a senior, that's when the Crips and Bloods started, right? And I think that some of that was started by us, but I do think that there were divide and conquer tactics to keep our community unstable. And sometimes you could create a beef, again, decades ago, and it'll still carry on today. So some things begin to have a life of their own. We don't remember how certain beefs happen, right? But all I know is I don't like them elves that live in that particular community. We don't like them. You know what I mean? And it carries on today. And it even goes beyond street organizations like that, but even to organizations. Somebody might say, well, I don't like them Panthers. Or I don't like the people who in the US organization. I don't like the people in the Coweta movement, but some people actually are functioning off of incorrect information that some of it was planted by the FBI in the late 1960s. Am I lying, brother Amara? Some of that stuff is so old that a lot of, I've had students argue with some information that was provided by an undercover agent to why somebody is cool or not cool. And so, not to say that people didn't make mistakes, people did, and we do need to have some truth and reconciliation within our own movements today about some of the things that occurred in the past. But we can't function off information that was provided by our enemies.
Okay, what about you, Rashaki?
Just listening to the information, excellent information. No question.
Thank you, brother.
Joe, you have any questions?
Not any questions, just want to comment on a couple of things. When he was talking about the ideological influences that it has had on, Black society, with that television, the newspapers, movies, even Roots got us to thinking about some stuff, but the misinformation that was in the movie was ridiculous. It kept that jungle mentality thing throughout the movie when 2 miles down the road where he was getting the wood to make his drum, there was a great university. They didn't mention that stuff. You know what I mean? And also when a current one, not current, but a few years back, with General Field Marshal Idi Amin Dada, one of my heroes, who they used propaganda,
Right.
Blacks in America to turn against him, talking about he's killing 100,000 Christians, but they never showed no bodies. But they don't talk about what he was really about was we nationalizing all these industries that you've created in my country, get on this plane and get out of here. You know what I mean? Which could have been great if all the other African nations would have did the same. We'd be way ahead of the game. So he had to go. And then with the movie of Shaka Zulu, which was nothing more to show that when Nelson Mandela would be released, all the Zulus are raised up on the white folks. That's the impression that they wanted to give by showing that movie. People don't understand that the movie was produced by the white South African government. Apartheid. What do you think you're getting out of that? So, things like this. And then another thing, with the division, they keep that going. I love a quote from Dr. John Henry Clark. He said, "You don't allow strangers, outsiders in the family business. If you can't find nobody, go find old drunk Uncle Willie. Let him decide before you put them outsiders in family business." You know what I mean?
That's right.
Still haven't learned that lesson to a large degree. And just the propaganda that they use constantly. And the thing about reparations, I don't know if this can be counted as reparations, but I do. As part of the Freedmen's Bureau in 1877, they gave $154 million to the Freedmen's Bureau, to be distributed amongst Black people. That's 150 years ago. But what about the interest on that money alone? Where's that money? It sure was allocated. So where is that? There's a couple of things that we can go at them with. But I'm kind of like the doctor. I don't care what we do. They ain't giving it up. They give it up to everybody else but us. Which we need to, I don't want to say stop, trying to get it, but we need to proceed with the stuff that we can do by ourselves without them anyway.
Go ahead.
Weekend coming up. Labor Day.
I think it's a both and.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an either or. We definitely got to do our own thing. In fact, I want to brag a little bit. My wife and daughter are part of a school, African Center School, that comes through our own efforts here, right? So we got to create institutions. That's one thing we got to do, and pool our resources. But at the same time, like you say, I almost want to curse. I gotta be cool. These people owe us, and we need to demand what they owe us. And to me, it's not a one-time thing. I think that even things like the elimination of chattel slavery, voting rights, things like that came because we struggled for it. And that's what I mean by we got to get our youth, we got to get everybody on board. When we struggle for things and we're united, we get them, and we can achieve our freedom and we can achieve reparations that way. But that doesn't mean, like some things, like I agree with Dr. Clark, we don't have nobody in the room to resolve but us. You feel me? If I got a beef with Dr. Amon-Ra, I don't need a white mediator. You know what I mean? If we want to develop a curriculum for our children, I don't need a white interpreter for that. We need to do that. You know what I mean? It's some things we could do right now with our own capacity. So, but it's both and, it's not either or, as far as I'm concerned, for things like that. You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Big Brother, what they around the whole issue of the media, the movies, the television shows, even social media. I was thinking, but I saw one thing today, and I hope it was true. I saw somebody posted that they said that Nigeria just said that they would no longer have any American or British models in their advertisements, only Nigerians. I hope that's true. And then I hope they start using Nigerian indigenous styles and not just Euro, you know, like it ain't just Nigerians and white, blackface of white stuff, right? And so, but I hope that's true, and I hope we're moving in that direction. But how we educate our children, we definitely need to have some real self-determination in those areas. But it's, you know, that's how I see it. That's how I see it.
Anything else, Big Joe?
Put my mind that quick, you know.
Even, and here's another example of what I'm talking about. Actually, Amara and I were talking about beforehand, Black Studies. Black Studies is a form of reparations. We should and can educate ourselves. At the same time, we're paying taxes for our kids, our youth to go in these schools. So what, you know, people in Ra's generation, they went and took over, occupied campuses and demanded that they have an education that's relevant to our people. When I was in the 10th grade, Julian Johnson and them argued for that, right? That we should have a relevant education in Black Studies at Compton High. But that's a form of reparations. Reparations, we kind of get that it's just somebody giving us a check. But it comes in a lot of different forms. And one is correcting the record of what happened to people, you know? So but that's a piece that I'm, when we talk about reparations, and I hope it's really promoted in California, it ain't just about people getting a check. In fact, if we did give everybody a check without a certain type of things put in place, Brother Hemberg, you know what's gonna happen. It's gonna go right back to these people, right? It's gonna go right back, and the wealth inequality gap still exists. We gotta establish our own enterprises, institutions, and things like that, and the money should flow and be targeted toward things that's going to create real institutional development in our communities. But I ain't for just giving everybody $25,000 because we know what's going to happen with that.
Rims and jewelry.
Mall.
We know.
Tennis shoes.
What'd you say?
Tennis shoes.
Hey.
Yeah, you know, and further comment, you know, on the division that's created. I just want to mention on Ellis Island, you know, when people of African descent come here, and oftentimes when we go to other countries like Egypt, you know, they'll tell us, you know, don't you go down south, you know, where the blacks are. And when the Nigerians come here and other Africans, they tell them to stay away from the African American. That's another thing that they do. And also about the misinformation I wanted to mention was down in Brownsville when when they had all them thousands of brothers down there, and they only had like 30-some black women in the town. So the white folks scared they gonna give it to white women. So the white folks dressed up in brown face and shot up the town and blamed it on the black soldiers so the government would get them out of there. And I'm gonna go on mute right now. It look like my guardians over getting fired up, barking and going on. So those are only comments I had.
But no, what you're saying is true. There's just like, we're still uncovering like different massacres, graveyards of where black bodies were buried, you know, due to atrocities and stuff. There were whole black towns just destroyed, you know, in our grandparents' time, in our great grandparents' time. And we're talking about after slavery. So when we talk about reparations, again, we're not just talking about slavery. There was some horrific things that were done to our ancestors. And I still say somebody need to pay for that. You know how the Jews say never again. We got to have that same type of, no, they need to pay. And I will never forget that. And I'll teach my grandkids that too. Never forget that and still try to fight for it. You can see now, brother, I'm around my grandparent now. When you knew me, I was barely married. I just got married.
That's beautiful. Well, let me just interject a few things. And first of all, I want to say thank you for your wealth of knowledge, but you're not only a scholar, you're an activist. And give us some more information before you leave about the brother you're trying to help with the cancer, how we can help or get others to help or participate in a petition for freedom, or try to get our Congress people involved. If he's in a state prison, try to get our assembly or state assembly people there. I mean, you know, many of them just don't keep up with these issues. And you bring them to their issues, they might can do something. And, that's one thing. And to just educate people to the cruelty and bestiality of the criminal justice system when it comes down to, as you said, hardship considerations for this brother to be released in hospice care. But I got a few things, man, when I see you, I think about Brother Dadisi and the Morning Number Dancers and all the W.E.B. Du Bois Institute and right next to Onion Palmer and the Marcus Garvey School. I think about the accomplishments and achievements. You know, many of our people who were first a part of the enslavement through the colonial system and then into the United States system, they didn't enjoy the freedoms we have today. Decades, even centuries of Black people were held in captivity. But through their struggle, it took a long time to get us to where we are today. And we still having issues with the guy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, we got collaborators and CI's confidential informants. We had it. I mean, we still struggling, and we may not get the reparations during our generation, but maybe another generation ahead of us, as we struggle for it, we'll get it. That's the key to struggle. I mean, we'd still be in slavery if people didn't struggle. The political thing, you wouldn't have Warnock in Georgia running. And the other accomplishments that Black people turned out, as you said, were a bunch of momentum if it wasn't for Black people participating in struggle. So I appreciate the blessings that we have received, even though it's not what we want. Cornell Mitchell has put forth reparations bill every year for the study of reparations. I think it's HR 40, is it?
HR 40, yes.
Yeah, he's been doing that for years. But did the Black public high school teachers talk about it?
Right.
Did the Black college teachers talk about it?
Right.
No, you have to build a movement. That's what we had in the 60s, a serious movement, you know. And thank you for that slide, Rashidi. And then we got to continue to struggle for in so many different fronts that we got our people on. Look at Cori Bush out of Ferguson. She's a congresswoman now.
Right.
Takes a hard line progressive. But without the Ferguson struggle, we
Right.
wouldn't have her there.
That's
The
right.
same thing with this new little young brother out of Florida, who just got the nomination for the a primary in a stronghold Democratic district that was for gun reform and things of this nature. He just got won the primary. So struggle pays dividends. A lot of people make you think we ain't did nothing, ain't going nowhere.
Right.
But brother, when you say Chokwe Lumumba, y'all attorney, but his son is now the mayor of Jackson.
That's right.
And that's where Omario Padelli and the Republic of New Africa had their farm. And when the feds came in to close them down and put him in jail for 11 years.
Right.
We ain't even got to the brother out of North Carolina. I forget his name. He was part of the North Carolina 11.
Ben Chavis.
Ben Chavis, man, people pay dues, man.
Right.
You know, people pay dues. And we have to remember that, and Malcolm said, wherever Black people is, it's a battle line. Now, you don't have to get involved in the struggle if you don't want to get in it. I mean, you know, to have a professor like you and teaching these young people is gratifying and a part of the struggle, you know, because you're conscious. There's a lot of Negroes teaching, you know, like Haki used to say, there's some brothers and sisters lost, they need to stay lost, you know, because they you know, they just, you know, look, Blacks for Trump. What's going on? You know what I'm saying? You know, a Negro running because Trump endorsed them, and so they election denied. You know, I mean, it goes on and on, but we've always had collaborators, you know, and things of this nature. But getting back to your presentation, when you say COINTELPRO, the FBI, yeah, that started with Marcus Garvey and up into the 60s. But the countering of our intelligence started when we had an encountership of the third kind with this beast. And he wouldn't let us practice our culture, wouldn't let us name ourselves, wouldn't let us speak the same language to each other, wouldn't let us, you know, they did so much to change us into a mentality, whereas some of us lost our history, lost our culture, and lost our values, and was absorbed into theirs. So what we have today is a bunch of Black people who see themselves as not African Americans, just American. You know, and they will say, I don't want to be known as a Black American. I just want to be known as American. You understand? I don't want to be known as a Black actor. I just want to be known as an actor. Now, as if saying Black diminishes it. So when we talk about all the people that were victims, you know, oh man, you know, we ain't even got to Mumia Abdul Mumia
Abu Jamal.
Yeah, you know, the witnesses came and said they was forced, and the police made them say what they said, and they still won't let the brother out.
Right.
You understand? And you know, we got so many, but as you were saying, I want you to go a little bit more, because see, this reparations that Sheila Jackson is pushing on Congress is a study.
Right.
And you're teaching reparations. How do you feel about that? And what is your analysis of that?
They actually have revised the bill a little bit more since the original one that was presented, I believe, in 1989 by John Conyers, that said it was just a study bill. Now they're saying it's not only the study, but to come up with proposals. And so it's the former commission that's gonna kind of do the research. I actually think the research is necessary because I don't believe reparations is just a one-time thing. I believe it's a process. And there's when you think of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, they say it's a process that involves the governments, and that's federal, state, and local governments. It's a process that involves institutions, corporations, foundations. All of them people have done things that we need to be compensated for. Sometimes it even involves families, particular white families. If you could document it and how they benefited from the oppression of Black people, I think they need to be challenged. Back in the day, you remember this, Professor Ra, remember James Foreman was challenging these white churches. And some of the white churches did create some stuff. Remember they would, I remember when I was in junior high, they would take over white churches on Sundays. Brothers like you mentioned Ron Wilkins Crook earlier, I think he did that during that time. And so the Presbyterian Church, the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, all of them created funds, the Congregationalist Church funds to at least deal with social justice issues. And again, as you said, it was because people struggled to achieve that. And so I think it's going to happen a variety of ways. So I think it does need to be studied. Different jurisdictions need to figure out how it applies to them, and people need to fight for it. Just like that the city of Evanston, Illinois, they documented real estate discrimination, redlining against Black folks, and so they created a $10 million fund to start, and they have different corporations and stuff kicking into that, and they go to not only first-time Black homeowners, but they also go to people who need to renovate their homes and things of that nature. That's just one form of reparations. So when they say it needs to be studied, it shouldn't be, because I think we have in our heads that somebody's just going to give us a check and that's it. That's what they did to the Japanese and also did to the American Indians. And we look at those things and see they were inadequate, And so we do need to research and study it, but then we need to make some relevant proposals for what's going on. I also just want to mention, I'm glad you made that suggestion about what could be done about Dr. Matulu, and Brother Rashaki took the link and posted it up about him. And then if you can reach out, he is a federal prisoner held by the board. And so if talk to Karen Bass. I know she's running for mayor now. Maybe she don't want to say nothing, but talk to Karen Bass and other congressional people in your area and see if they'll speak on this. If people listening from Northern California, contact Barbara Lee. I know their offices have been contacted before, but if their constituents will reach out to them. There have been some people in Congress who have spoken on his situation. And I know in the case of Jamil Alameen, H. Rap Brown, where the Congressional Black Caucus got him out of a prison in Colorado, probably the worst prison in the country, because he was having health problems. And they had him moved to a medical facility because, again, the Congressional Black Caucus put pressure on the Bureau of Prisons. And so I agree with Professor Ra. I don't think that our liberation is going to come through us having elected officials, but they can play a critical role in us having a strategy to make things easier on our people and things of that nature. If you can reach out to whoever your congressional person is and have them support this compassionate release for Dr. Shakur, we would appreciate it. All so right. He can live the last part of his life with his family.
Okay, then what about the Institute of Black World with Ron Daniels and their proposal? Have you got any information on them?
I don't have direct information with them. That's not an organization I work closely with, but I know they still exist. They still have work that they're doing around reparations also.
Okay, and now what role do critical race theory in your opinion deals with countering our Black movement and Black consciousness and even reparation, with them saying that slavery was just displaced workers You know, not they weren't enslaved. I mean, all those things. I mean, how do you how do you deal with that? Yeah.
Man, we
Like,
right in the middle of that down here. In fact, the K through 12 schools in Georgia, they introduced legislation to say that they can't teach Ernest, I got to keep from cursing. You know how I really talk. But how these racists are saying, you can't teach divisive concepts. So to them, a divisive concept is to talk about the United States put Japanese in concentration camps, that, millions of our ancestors were captured and brought here from Africa and forced to work, right, as captives. Those that they stole the land from the indigenous people, right? All those are divisive concepts, but it's just, to me, a last ditch attempt to protect white supremacy. They want to not only lie to us, but they want to lie to their own children, because, think about it. When this George Floyd thing happened, there was a lot of white kids in the street too. You know what I mean? So that frightens the hell out of white people. That was one of the things that hip hop scares them, right? Because they don't want, the young people listening to Black voices. And so they don't, again, that's when we talk about, when I said it's ideological, they fighting on that terrain too. It's not just about killing us physically, but also trying to control what people think. Not just our people, but their people too. Because COINTELPRO was about also not trying to keep us from having any allies that would support our fight for justice, right? So, we got to keep that in mind too. That was a good point. Unfortunately, they decided to leave the college piece alone for right now. They're still coming. And again, this whole thing is really promoted by groups like the Proud Boys, the MAGA people. They decided that they would take over local and state school boards and promote this agenda. And so we have to counter it. I don't know if it's a big thing in California like it is down here.
Well, yeah, well, they can divert our attention and just say you got free Disneyland tickets. That doesn't make it. I mean, just forget all about the movement, Magic Mountain, like a mountain magic.
I had one other thought about what you said too, when you describe, and this, I know I have a lot of conversations with Brother Hembrick. I think sometimes our people suffer from, I heard somebody mention Stockholm syndrome, where you begin to identify with your captor.
Yeah.
And so we have to really, and that's what I kind of see your show and several others is doing, is trying to break that type of Stockholm syndrome.
It's important because, but you can't get mad at them. I mean, oppression does.
Oh no, hey, my teachers taught me you were once a Negro until somebody took the time to teach you.
Yeah.
Hey, and one of my mentors told me, he said, "Boy, you still got some of that in you." It's a daily battle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a daily. It's like a 12-step program we need, Brother Hembrick.
It's like people getting away from being Black or saying Black. I heard NAACP brother say tomorrow, they're against people that look like me. He can't even say Black people.
Wow.
And we're people of color. But anyway, the last question is dealing with COINTELPRO. When we think about Assata Shakur, Omari Opadele and Ben Chavis, Mother Africa from the movement, and we think about even Nelson Mandela, how he, and Winnie, that divide and conquer. See, when we think about COINTELPRO, they have it on all levels of law enforcement. It turned the people against progressive young Black people by demonizing them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, more people talk about youth violence than they talk about youth graduating from college and youth going into leadership and doing positive things. I mean, they got you to the point that you demonize yourself, you know, and they make you feel hopeless and helpless by putting on that propaganda in the news, you know, and things of this nature. Whereas they got a whole series of stuff about Jewish Holocaust and Jewish thing on CNN. And it's all about hope and, you know, and getting the public that the feel for them. They never talk about our serious oppression. And we don't have leaders doing it. My question to you is, how do we counter the fact that the majority of our youth do not know about those people I just mentioned because of the counterintelligence? You asked me, you ever hear of Assata Shakur? You know, one of the number one people on the FBI, one of the Cuba been keeping her in sanctuary for a long time. The MOVE movement, where they bombed Black people like they did in Oklahoma. They don't even, you know, I mean, we do it on the college level, but we got to get into the home. That's the primary education. And so we have to find strategy to get into the home. Now, one way to get into the home is through the media, through internet, and through that, getting more programs.
All right.
But mainstreaming is what most people be wanting. CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News, or the regular counter news. That's what they call mainstreaming. But we gotta get people that. But then you got so many theorists that make up stuff. They won't take the shot for the vaccine. That you can beat it with vegetables and apples and taking out, you know, I mean, all kind of stuff you're out there, man. We got to begin to develop a different strategy of struggle and using this technology to help us begin a movement of consciousness. But they let all these wild people on with all these wild theories. So in Georgia, what do y'all do to stay progressive? Because you was telling me about your student organizations and things. And do you know other campuses that's doing it? Countering the counterintelligence?
Yeah, actually, I work with the National Council of Black Studies, and we try to network with other campuses and other educators through that vehicle. But in the people I work with directly, you remember the group we had of young people when I lived there, the New African Scouts. We had that group here in Atlanta. We also have it not only in Atlanta, but New York, DC, Detroit, Mississippi. And in the summer, we have summer camps with our young people for at least a week to 10 days. And they bring in other young people who are not a part of the group. That's one thing, but I think even larger than that, one of the things I learned, particularly when I mentioned I was working in the prisons, and I learned this actually from Matulu Shakur. I remember I was going in and I was trying to teach one day, and I was trying to get the young men involved in a lesson, and they weren't really responding. And they were trying to figure out what I was trying to do because I was only speaking to the young men. And one of the brothers said, well, you know, what are you trying to do? Why are you just talking to the young men? I said, well, I'm just trying to get everybody involved. And they said, we don't want you to think that none of us are punks, you know? And so Matulu, who was in the class, he intervened. He said, Brother Umoja, he said, you're a good teacher, but if you want to get everybody involved, particularly these young men, you need to talk to them about hip hop. And we start to deal with the hip hop piece, and we did get damn near the whole prison involved. You know what I mean? And we started introducing conscious hip hop, and we started, some of the brothers who are only talking about a more like criminalized form of hip hop start rapping conscious after that. And so that's one thing we could do. And I have been able to teach about Assata Shakur and some of the people you talked about through introducing songs that mention them in the classroom as a jumping off point. So I think if we get some of these artists, and I think we need to have more conversation with some of these young artists. In fact, my niece is an artist who lives in LA. She just got her PhD at UCLA in education. I really like to maybe introduce her to y'all. Maybe she could talk about that, because one of the things she got her PhD is looking at what she calls hip hop pedagogy, teaching through utilizing hip hop.
Wow.
And she's somebody who was raised in the movement. She was in our youth organizations and things of that nature. Ife Jai is her name. And so, but I think that's one vehicle that we have to use, the art and music to something that's familiar to, and that even goes beyond the young people I'm in contact with, because we mostly get, you know, our children and grandchildren, and maybe people who are looking for something like that, you know, and not to mention the school we have, it's not real large, right? But how do we impact all these other Black minds? We got to do that. We can't just think defense. We got to think offense, right?
Yeah.
We got to reach out and get more minds and get into, as you said, into more homes. And so we have to figure that out. And I do think the social media piece, I've even been thinking myself, like one of the books I'm working on is, you remember Brother Robert F. Williams in North Carolina. I'm editing his last memoir, but I talked to his son before he passed. And I got the idea from his son to do the story of Robert Williams, but through like a comic book. So we have to think of different ways to get to young people than the traditional ways. Because if I do just a scholarly book on it, it's only going to be in the classroom at the college level. Again, we got to think of how we're going to get these junior high school kids. Because when I tell you, Ernest Hall, who's on here now, I remember when we were playing basketball together, and he was one of the serious-minded people then, right? So how do we get people who were doing that, you know, at that age to begin to think about stuff at that age, you know? And you know, he said some things then that had impact on me, that why I'm doing what I am today. My sister, going to Compton High, she said things to me when I was in high school that had impact on me today, you know? So we got to make some impact on our youth. And that, again, going back to the theme of COINTELPRO, that was one of its objectives, to make sure the youth would not get involved in the struggle. That was one of the things that J. Edgar Hoover clearly put out in terms of his targeting of Black people, that they didn't want the younger generation to get involved. They wanted to isolate them from our movement.
They did a good job too.
They did. We must admit.
Okay, well, listen, brothers, this has been an excellent presentation. I know it's late out there in Georgia.
No doubt.
You got classes in the morning?
I got them in the afternoon. But I'm gonna get my butt out of bed and go to water aerobics.
All right. Hey, brother Rashiki, you want to
deal with these old bones?
Yeah.
It's Ernest's fault. My knees are bad.
And that old gym.
Okay.
Appreciate everything, Professor Umoja. Excellent.
Man, appreciate you, brother, and thanks. This brother has diligently, since I was on the program last year, sent me the videos, recordings, even though I subscribe on YouTube, but I still like to get them direct.
Yeah, he does a great job. We appreciate Brother Rashiki. And Brother Ernest, you played ball, right?
Yeah, I played a little basketball.
He played D1 basketball and is a state champion in California in junior college.
Oh, you played for Newman then?
Yeah, I played for Coach Newman over at Compton College.
You was at Compton College then?
Yeah.
when you was at Newman. And then you played for Armstrong and Newman at Compton High?
I never played varsity at Compton High.
Okay.
Right.
Oh,
And that's the trip. He didn't play varsity, but he's a D1 basketball player in West Virginia and started.
well, they had a lot of talent that didn't make the team because a lot of reasons. You know, the coach had his favorites, and you know, and returning cats. Man, Compton High was known for basketball, but you know, there was a lot of politics down there. And when it came down to it, I know a lot of cats that I played with at the park that couldn't make the team, but they shot the park lights out, man. You know, just that. But I enjoyed playing against Compton when I was at Centennial. I loved it, man. And
Was Newman your coach?
no, we had all white boys in them days.
Okay.
Yeah, all white boys. None of them were worth a quarter.
Ron, what year was Newman over at Centennial?
He came, I think around, it had to be, let me see, I was 68, 69. He may have went in there around 68, 69, somewhere around there. Because
we way off topic, but I think he was JV coach at Compton.
Well, he was at Centennial first.
Okay.
He went over to Compton. Yeah, because he's at Mona Park. We won the first championship with him at Mona Park. Me, Eldridge Graves, James Dunn, and a bunch of other brothers that went to Compton High. And he got the best talent from all the schools. And we took on the Los Angeles County Championship. You know, so yeah, that. But then he went over to Compton High with Hopwood. When Hopwood was over there. I don't know. I can't remember, man. But I know he was a good brother, and man, all the good he brought in the world lasts forever. You know, they never really gave him a real good job. Even though he won the state championship, he fired on one of the referees. You know about it, brother.
Yeah.
He knocked one of them out almost. You know?
Well, you know, when he knocked that referee out, they suspended him for a year.
Yeah.
And that was the year I came over to Compton College, and he redshirted. He asked me not to play that year, so I redshirted.
Okay.
And came back the next year, and we won the state championship.
So you won 2 state championships?
Well, no, just one. I didn't play with the Larry that won it in 1970. Larry Hollyfield now.
Yeah.
I won it in 72, 73.
Oh yeah, so that's the second one.
Well, Newman's second one. Yeah, Newman's second one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the second.
Well,
Those were the days.
Yeah, Roger keep cousins going out, so we can keep Brother Akinyele online when we need him again.
So they're gonna keep me on forever.
Yeah, brother.
Going to the history of Compton basketball. All right.
And that's another one.
Yeah.
All right. So let me show you guys what we got for Wednesday. So we got Brother Thomas coming on, one of our team members. And this is going to be very interesting. I read about it, some of his writings. It's reproductive evolution. All offspring must pay it forward. So that's going to be an excellent topic. I'm eager to hear what he's going to say. So let's sign off. Each one teach one, and Conscious Corner. Everybody have a good evening.
All right.
Peace.
All right. Take care.